Space Marine Outriders are a close support unit that is on bikes, meant to guard the flanks of the Space Marine formations, take out infiltrators, and also attack the flanks of their opponents using hit-and-run tactics. Hello everybody, my name is Spoonsrattle, and today we are covering the Space Marine Outriders, of course from Codex Space Marines. This is the biker unit that came out last edition. The Space Marine bikers have been replaced by these Outriders on their bigger, newer bikes. The Outrider squad comes in at 80 points, or 160 points for 6, 3 and 6 being the squad size. Or up to 7 with the Invader ATV. They move 12 inches, so very fast, are toughness 5, so nice and resilient to small arms, with a 3+ save and 4 wounds, so pretty chunky, with leadership 6+ and OC 2, nice for objectives. And then the ATV is the same, except it has 8 wounds instead of 4. And that does cost an extra 60 points to bring the Invader ATV, no matter the size of the unit. In terms of ranged weapons, they all have the ATV has a bolt pistol, which is 12-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 3s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. The twin bolt rifle is on every model. It's twin linked, 24-inch range with 2 attacks, hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 1, and damage 1. Nice and consistent for blowing away things like guardsmen. The heavy bolt pistol is on the Outriders themselves. It's 1 attack that hits on 3s at strength 4, AP 1, damage 1. Just nice if you are in combat. The Onslaught Gatling Cannon is the main armament of the ATV with dev wounds, 24-inch range, 8 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 5, AP 0, and damage 1. Or you can swap it for a multi-melta, which is melta 2, 18-inch range, 2 attacks hit on 3s at strength 9, AP 4, and damage d6. I'd generally bring the multi-melta just because it is some nice anti-tank punch, but the Gatling Cannon looks cooler. In terms of melee weapons, the chain sword that comes on the ATVs is 4 attacks hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 1, and damage 1, and the ATV gets a close combat weapon with 5 attacks at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. While this melee is fairly standard for the bikers and pretty forgettable for the ATV, it gets juiced by their Thunderous Impact special rule, which means each time a model in this unit makes a melee attack, if that unit made a charge move this turn, improve the strength and damage of that attack by 1. So, of course, you have your chainsword at strength 5, AP 1, damage 2, and even your close combat weapon at strength 5, AP 0, damage 2, which is quite good melee for dealing with infantry. The unit comp is 1 Outrider Sergeant, then 2 to 5 Outriders, and a 0 or 1 Invader ATV. And the bikers are equipped with heavy bolt pistols, bolt rifles, and Astartes chainswords. The AVTV has a bolt pistol, twin bolt rifle, Onslaught Gatling Cannon, and a close combat weapon, and they have mounted and grenades as their main keywords. This is a pretty solid stat line for the standard bikers, and I'd say the ATV is worth the upgrade if you're going big on these guys as a keystone unit, not just for the extra tank, but also for the extra durability that they bring to the table. Moving on to leaders, there's quite a few because I'm covering the Legends ones. The Apothecary on bike, it allows you to resurrect models and doesn't restrict you from reviving ATVs, which is nice, and with the Outrider buff, his chainsword isn't too bad. This is especially good if you can get an invuln save with, say, a rifle procession. The Captain bike allows you to assault, gives you assault on your weapon so you can advance and shoot, and free stretch is always great, and he also loves the buff, having his damage 3 Power Fist or Thunderhammer, for example. Company Champion is pretty cheap at 60 points, with the solid melee damage of a mastercrafted power weapon, and +1 to charge is pretty handy if you just want a budget bike buffer. Librarian on bike has a little bit more range damage thanks to his spells, and the invuln is very nice for their durability, and his melee loves the buff, going from D3 damage to D3 +1. The Tech Marine on bike is surprisingly the fightiest character here, in my opinion, as he gets 2 servo arms, a plasma cutter, and then a melee weapon, which will usually amount to sort of 8 Power Fist type attacks, though the servo arms do get damage 3. If you bring the Omniscient Axe, of course, he gets even more attacks, and they all love the buffs, of course, because they all get the damage boosts. And he can buff vehicles if there's one nearby. The Chaplain on bike is one of our few non-legend options here, and so he's your option for tournament play if you're not playing a Divergent chapter, and I think he's fantastic. The twin-linked bolt guns love the devastating wounds he can give, as does the multi-melta from the Invader ATV, and his own melee loves the +1 strength and damage, bringing it to strength 7, AP 1, and damage 3, and +1 to wound helps them be far more general purpose against things like vehicles. The Ancient on bike is another Legends option who gives you extra OC and another power weapon, so you can have a pretty dense unit for objectives, though I will say he's a little expensive at 90 points. Samael, of course, the Master of the Raven Wing, actually I think fits in quite well here. Advance and charge is awesome, and his own melee, of course, benefits. I'd say he's a pretty solid unit to have here. Forcing enemies to fall back is good when it's so easy for you to get to combat. And the command squad from the Raven Wing is also very good. Their melee loves the buff, bringing their normal guys to damage 2, and the champion up to damage 3, and extra OC and reviving models. This probably makes the command squad their most effective leader, but he's also their most expensive, as that really should go. If you have the points, go for the command squad, and if you're playing Dark Angels. If not, and you're playing in a tournament, the chaplain's your only option. Otherwise, really all of these characters have merit, and they're all quite fun. The Tech Marine is very customizable. I quite like that datasheet. I'll definitely do a video on him at some point in the future. Moving on to detachments, we have Gladius up first. Every Space Marine unit is good here. They like Honor the Chapter for extra AP, and Advance in Charge is great. Anvil can be very useful for them to be the screen in front of everyone that's standing still and shooting, so they can zip around and make sure everyone stays safe, and Ironstorm's the same, but with vehicles. Firestorm gives you that +1 strength, which is pretty nice on the bolters, makes them more effective against Space Marines. And Strength 10 Melta is awesome if you're bringing the ATV, and Assault is pretty handy just to allow them to move extra fast, and Crucible of Battle for +1 to wound. In Stormlance, you get Advance in Charge, which is very good, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, a lot of enhancements for bikers there, so definitely a solid place for him. First Company is a no. Vanguard is pretty good, just because extra durability is nice, as these guys can be a little susceptible to high AP, so being able to cut that down is good. And Librarius Conclave, of course, if you're bringing the Librarian on bike, they, of course, benefit from that. They could get extra speed to make them super fast with Advance and Charge. You can get extra strength and melee, which is also very nice. And you can also get rerolls 1 to hit and wound, all of which are very good on these guys. Out of these, I'd say the most standout ones, Stormlance, unsurprisingly, is very good. Gladius, everyone's good in Gladius. And if you are playing just a casual game, which chances are you are, and you bring a Librarian on bike, I'd say these guys are excellent in Librarius Conclave, though I think I'm very partial to that detachment. I'm not even the biggest Librarian fan, I just think it's very fun. Anyways, it's time to move on to the Divergent chapters, of course, starting off with the First Legion, the Dark Angels. So the Dark Angels, these guys have Ravenwing, not unsurprisingly, and they gain Battle Line and company of Hunters, which is very nice. And they can pretty much fulfill any role for Ravenwing that they need, whether that be just objective grabbers, or if you're playing the Lion's Talons, they're very cheap, so they can just charge in with some Deathwing Knights to give them those buffs, among other things. And in general, they're just a solid data sheet. Blood Angels, their melee is exceptional in Liberator Assault Group. They love the extra strength, bringing them all the way up to Strength 7, and the extra attack is also very appreciated. And with a Chaplain, they're very general purpose in this detachment. In terms of Space Wolves, Feel No Pain is great because they have so many wounds per model, and lethal hits are very handy, just because, again, their strength's not very high. Surprise charging through Heroes of Fenris is pretty nice, since these guys can really go wherever they want on the board. They could make a sort of no-fly zone, because if anyone moves within 3 inches of them, of course they can charge into them. And then Black Templars, obviously they will enjoy the Feel No Pains and lethal hits from Righteous Crusaders, and if you're playing Wrathful Procession, a 5+ invulnerable save would be very good on them. The bonus strength is also very solid on them, and extra movement speed are all very good. Of course, that brings them up to a pretty blistering speed of 14-inch movement, as most of the movement buffs do. I'd say they actually have a pretty solid spot in all of the Divergent chapters, which is an interesting thing. You don't see that too often, I'd say. But they definitely excel in the Blood Angels with that extra melee damage, as most melee units do. They're at their best with extra strength and extra attacks. Who would have thunk it? Moving on to competition, we of course have the old Bike Squad from Legends, which have worse durability and melee damage, but they can carry a few special weapons, so if you just want a unit with melta-guns, I suppose that's an option. And the Ravenwing Black Knights from the Dark Angels, of course, are their main competition. They are, of course, very nasty. They aren't as tough, wounds-wise, but they do have an inbuilt invul, which is very nice. And in terms of melee damage, I'd say it's a side grade against most targets, but against vehicles and monsters, the Knights pull ahead, and at range, the Plasma Talons are excellent weapons. At just shooting just about anything, really. But the Outriders are more slanted towards light and medium infantry. They certainly won't be carving through Knights or anything like that without excessive buffs. I also should have given a little note here to the, what are they called? Thunderwolf Cavalry, because the Thunderwolf Cavalry are another mounted melee unit. Of course, they are a good bit more expensive, points-wise, though of course they also have similar rules to these guys, so that's another one to keep in mind. If you have the points, it could be worth upgrading to them. Moving on to my final thoughts. So, the Outriders are pretty simple, right? The Outriders, they are very good at killing infantry, light infantry and medium infantry like Space Marines, and then of course anything lighter than that they'll tear through pretty easily. They'll struggle against Terminators, unsurprisingly, but they're very fast, pretty darn tough, and their melee is very solid at the same time. They're a very good all-rounder. Of course, there's not that many of them in the squad, but since they have so many wounds, you still have a pretty dense unit. And they aren't susceptible to things like blast unless you're going for a big unit, which in that case, obviously they would be, but not even that badly because there's only 7 of them at most, or 8 with a character. And from there, they kind of just do what they're supposed to. They're meant to zip around, attack the flanks of your enemies, and get objectives, which they do quite well because they're OC2. Overall, I think the Outriders are quite solid, and that buff went a long way in making them a lot better. There's not that much to say about them because they're relatively simple. If you're going big, bring the whole squad in an ATV. If you just want utility, just bring 3. That's my rule of thumb. I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.